You getting my point, my dear? Yes, that's good. Give me 1 minute, guys. Yeah. Let's see. What is there? 619. Spring Boot, MVC. Spring Boot, MVC. Tell me next one. Second session. Second. There's no second one. Acha, the one I selected is that only. 1 minute, guys. Where is this? Our batch code is 619 now, guys. Just a minute. Let's end this dirty drafting work. Oh, already 619 is there in multiple places. 619. Spring Boot MVC, guys. That's fine. Tell me next one. Session 2. Yeah. Spring Boot MVC, Spring MVC plus plus. Spring MVC, Spring Boot MVC is designed around predefined front controller servlet called what? Dispatcher servlet. That means all operations and flows in the web application takes place under the control of what? Dispatcher servlet. Under control of what? Dispatcher servlet. The main components of Spring MVC, Spring Boot MVC application are: number one, dispatcher servlet. What is that? Front controller. Number two, handler or controller classes. Java classes having request delegation logics to what? Service, comma, DAO classes. Next, handler mapping. To map or link dispatcher servlet trapped request to whom, guys? Handler or controller classes. View component. These are what? Physical view component of any technology like JSP and other thing to have a presentation logic and to format the results. View resolver. To resolve or identify physical view component of what? Different technology based on the given logical view name. Okay. View resolver helps dispatcher servlet to identify the physical view component. Handler mapping helps dispatcher servlet to identify what? Right handler method and right handler class are not there. So these are the various components of what? Spring Boot MVC application, guys. Okay. Dispatch servlet front controller, handler class. In small application, it will directly process the request in handler methods. Come on. Okay, guys. And okay, what is there, guys? What is there, guys? In a big application, we keep that one in what? Service DAO classes. What classes? Service DAO classes to process the request to generate the logic. Are you getting my point there, guys? Super. One is what? Dispatcher servlet front controller. Handler are what? Controller classes. Handler mapping. View component. Next one what? View resolver. Are you getting my point? Yes. Handler mapping is a helper component for a dispatcher servlet. Handler mapping is helper component that identifies what? Correct handler or controller class to handle the request. Trapped by whom? Dispatcher servlet. View resolver is helper component that resolves or identifies what? Correct physical view component name and location to format result by executing what? Presentation logics. What logics, guys? Presentation logic. Conclusion is what, guys? To send the DS trapped request to appropriate handler method of what? Handler class. We need the support of what? Handler mapping component. To send and format the handler method generated or gathered results by identifying what? Appropriate physical view component like JSP. We need what? View resolver component. Simple, guys. To identify correct handler class handler method, dispatch servlet uses handler mapping. To identify correct view component, it takes the support of what, guys? Look at this typical controller class. Public class my controller @controller. This is the identity of the controller class. Okay. Public string show home page, some logic. But that is identified with what? Request path. 10 handler methods are there. 10 request path will be there. Getting my point? How to give that request path? There is an annotation called @request map. Tell me, in one handler class, only one handler method or lot of handler method? But how to tell, hey, request one, you go to first handler method. Hey, request two, you go to fourth handler method. That means there should be some identity for handler method or not there. What is that request path? If we keep this request path in the incoming request URLs, so based on this request path, the appropriate handler methods will be identified or not there. There are so many servlet. How we are telling request should go to this servlet by matching servlet URL pattern with URL content or not there. Yeah. Servlet component is not identified with its class name, but it is identified with its what? URL. Spring Bean is not identified with its class name, it is identified with its what? Bean ID. Controller class handler method is identified with its what? Request path that is given what? @request mapping annotation are not there. That is given in what? @request mapping annotation. What do you say, guys? It's really happening or not there? To configure Java class as Spring Bean come controller or handler class, we need @controller annotation or not there. We need @controller annotation or not there, guys? To configure Java method of controller class or handler class as what? Handler method with request path. We can use what? @request mapping annotation. One handler class can have what? Multiple handler method with unique request paths are not there. Simply with what? Unique request path. Are you getting my point there, guys? Yeah. Now let's see. To configure Java method of controller class or handler class as what? Handler method with request path. We can use what? @request mapping annotation. One handler class can have 0 or more handler methods are not there. So this is Spring Boot MVC diagram, flow diagram. This diagram you should keep in mind, and whenever they ask Spring Boot MVC flow, you should tell very confidently and positively, and you should not look like you mugged up and delivered. That much confidently how to reply. Okay, before going to the handler or controller class comes under what? Model layer. If you place business logic directly in the handler method, because business logic. Suppose in the same handler method, you are not writing business logic, you are writing logic to delegate to service or DAO classes. Then it comes under controller layer component. If you place business logic, model layer. If you keep logic to delegate request to what? Other component, then it comes under what? Controller layer. That's good? Yes. Fine. Okay, now concentrate one by one. This is number one. This is number one. What is number one, guys? Programmer deploys. What is there? Okay, programmer deploys. Application, Spring Boot MVC application in web server. Spring Boot MVC application in what? Web server. Number two. Because of load on startup that is enabled on what? Dispatcher servlet. Servlet container create dispatcher servlet class object. As part of initialization, init method of dispatcher servlet execute. Inside that, IOC container is created. This IOC container perform pre-instantiation of singleton scope Spring Beans. Okay, like handler mapping, view resolver, service, DAO, whatever it is, controller classes. And necessary injections are done, and they are kept in internal cache of the IOC container. Is that clear, guys? This is number two. Number three. That means the moment you deployed, all major activities are done. Yes or no? No? Okay. Number three. Okay. Browser is the client for web application. Generates the request or not there? Definitely generates the request or not there? Super. Definitely generates the request. Okay, in this request, what is there? Last word info is there. Remember that. Okay. But since dispatcher servlet URL pattern is a slash, it will trap and take the request or not there. And applies common system services, security, logging, auditing kind of thing. That is number 4. Number 5. It will hand over the request to handler mapping component now, my dear. It takes the request, gives to handler mapping. Number 6. Tell me. This handler mapping component, what component, guys? This what? Handler mapping component searches for all the controller classes, that too what? Handler method, whose request path is matched with incoming request URL path. What's the last word here? Info. It will search in all the controller classes for handler method, whose request path is what? Info. Matching? Okay, that is number 6. Question mark means it is searching and getting. There may be, see, generally we take controller class on one per module. In one controller class, lot of handler methods will be there, right? So many handler methods will be there. Multiple handler method, so many controller classes. Are you getting my point there or not there? Super. Okay. Once found, guys, what it will do? Once found, what it will do? It will gather handler method signature, controller class default bean ID. Yes? And who will gather handler mapping? And handler mapping passes that information to whom? Dispatchers are. So now the selected handler method and it's a controller class. Information is now with what, guys? Dispatcher servlet. Everything happens with the dispatcher servlet, no doubt. Okay, now listen. Okay, that is number 7. Number 8. Dispatcher servlet receives the controller class bean ID, submits to IOC container, gets the controller class object. Already handler method signature is there, na? Okay, on that controller class object, it will call handler method. That is number 8. Number 9, handler method executes this time. Okay, sometimes it will directly process the request, generates the result, keeps in a scope. Keeps in a scope, generally request scope. Why? Request to request inputs will change, request to response output also will change. Keeps in a scope or not there? Okay, na? Keeps in a scope. That is number 9. What is number 10, guys? Keeps in a scope. This is number 9. This is what? Simply number 9. Definitely keeps in a scope. Number 10. Listen very carefully. Result is there in a scope, but number 10, it returns one token, not the result, returns one token that is technically called logical view name. That is like a hint to pick up the JSP component, hint to pick up the view component. Okay. Where is the result, sir? Result is already there in a scope. Forget about request scope means it is visible throughout the request. As long as that request processing is happening, it is visible. It is returning logical view name, some token like X, Y, Z kind of thing. Okay, that is number 10. Number 11. Dispatcher servlet receives the logical view name and passes to view resolver or not. Dispatcher servlet receives the logical view name and passes to view resolver or not there. Passes to view resolver or not there. Okay, this view resolver linked with property file, XML file, it submits the logical view name and it gets the name and location of the physical view component. That means real view comp. Gets what, guys? Name and location of the physical view component, nothing but real view component. Simply gets what? Name and location of the physical view component, nothing but what? Real view component. Are you understanding my statement, guys? Okay. That's great. Physical view component. That name and location gone to whom? Dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet, okay, executes that physical view component, right? Their presentation logic is there. Listen, this and this both are in the same request. Already in request scope, result is there. This physical view component gathers the result. That's a dotted arrow, not direct link, right? Dotted arrow. Gathers the result, formats the result. Now, formatted result comes to whom? Dispatcher servlet. That is 14. What is where? 15. Tell me what is 15, guys? It sends formatted result to browser as a response or not there. Number 16, come on. Okay, it displays that formatted result in the browser in the form of dynamic web page content or not there. Simply in the form of dynamic web page content or not there. Everything is happening in control with the dispatcher servlet or not there. Going here and there, but coming back to dispatcher servlet. Yeah, and it is trapping the request. Okay, it is trapping the response. Come on. And that's why I can say it is acting as what? Entry and exit point of both request and response are not there. Yeah. Once again, see the flow. Then I will ask some questions. Okay. It should not be there in your head. It should be there in your blood. There is no interview. Okay. That will be completed without asking query on what? Spring Boot MVC flow. Mandatory question on what? Spring Boot MVC. Compulsory question will be there on Spring Boot MVC. Please remember that. Right? Okay. Let it be. Number 1. Programmer deploys Spring Boot MVC application in web server. Number 2. Because of load on startup that is enabled on dispatcher servlet, the servlet container create dispatcher servlet object. In that process, initialization of dispatcher servlet starts by calling init method. Inside init method, IOC container is created. There what? All spring beans are what? All spring beans are what? Instantiated, injected with each other. All spring beans are instantiated and what? Injected with each other. And they are kept in what? Internal cache of the IOC container. They're definitely kept in what? Internal cache of the IOC container. Everyone getting my point? Yes. Super. Number 4. Okay, that is number 3. Browser gives request to Spring Boot MVC application. Number 4. Dispatcher servlet traps and takes the request. Applies the common system services. We focus on number. Number 6. Dispatcher servlet handovers a request to handler mapping component. Number 6. Handler mapping component internally uses reflection API, searches for a right handler method in all the controller classes whose request path is matching with the request URL path. Okay, that is number 6. Number 7. Once that is found, the handler mapping component gathers the matched handler method signature, controller class bean ID, and passes that info to dispatcher servlet. Number 8. Now dispatcher servlet submits the received bean ID to what? IOC container, gets the controller class object. On that object, it calls the handler method. Number 9. Either handler method directly processes the request and generates the result, keeps the result in a request scope. That is called generally model attribute, request scope, whatever it is. Okay. Sometimes it will talk to service DAO, process the request, gets the result, again keeps the result in a scope. Again keeps the result in a scope. Got it, my dear? What is that, guys? Number? That is number 9. Number 10. Dispatcher servlet returns logical view name, a token, not the file, not the JSP file name, not the view component, just a token. Why, sir? And tomorrow I replaced JSP with jQuery, JSP with Angular. That time, if you have written the file, it is something hard coding now, boss. That's why they get just written logical view name. That is number what? 10. Number 11. Dispatcher servlet passes that logical view name to view resolve. Number 12. View resolver takes that logical view name, communicates with a nearby property file or XML file, try to find out the name and location of physical view component. What's the advantage? Tomorrow you don't want to work with JSP, you want to work with what? Angular. You have to do modification in what? Property file. Yes, na boss? Are you going to touch any source code, guys? That's why they have come up with what? Logical view. In bank, you submitted check, they give one token. Okay, you are busy by passing the token to your employee or your friend, you can collect the money or not there. Suppose they said, while collecting money on also customer should be there. If they say like this, customer should be there. Come on, guys. Okay, then it will be time waste for the customer or not there. It will be definitely time waste operation for customer or not there. That's why they come up with what? This logical view name concept, guys. What concept? Logical view name concept. Is that clear, my dear? Come on. Hmm. Yeah. After that, what next, guys? Yeah. Tell me. The physical view component name and location goes to dispatchers. Dispatchers are let execute physical view component. Okay, that is number 13. Somehow physical view component reads the scoped data, nothing but result, format the result. Okay, number 14. It will pass those formatted result back to whom? Dispatcher servlet. Okay, next number 15. Dispatcher servlet sends that one to what? Browser as response. Number 16. Browser displays that response on the web as web page, dynamic web page. Okay, do one thing. I'm giving 5 minutes time. Everyone read the number and try to analyze what is happening internally. I want everyone, you should have a complete satisfactory for all the 60 numbers. Done? Yeah, I think everyone go through the numbers. Okay, I'll ask few numbers, guys. Can you tell me what is number 6? Hame Lana is not going to. What is number 6? Can you tell me specifically what is number 6? Okay, let me pick up. Okay, red t-shirt. You tell me what is number 6? Handler mapping searches for the yes. Handler mapping searches in all the controller classes for the right handler method to handle the request by matching incoming request URL path with the handler method request path. You are telling but not connecting properly. Okay. Right. You. Yeah. Can you tell me what is number 11? No? Stays here. You don't know. Arre, what's that? In interview also you don't open mouth. Without giving interview only you want job. Try. What is number 11? What is number 11? Okay. Last row backstat. What is number 11? I know that logical view. What actually happening? Don't read the name. Who is passing whom to what? Who is passing? Controller is passing. Controller is passing. I'm talking about 11, not 10. Yeah, dispatch servlet is passing received logical view name to view resolve. Okay, sit down. This specs wala. Number 12. What's happening in 12? Tell me. No, that's how it is passing. View resolver submits the logical view name to nearby property file or XML file, gets the name and location of the physical view component, and passes that information to whom? Dispatcher, sir. And passes that information to dispatcher, sir. That is number 12. Right. Number 13. Anyone from girls? Number 13. Anyone from girls? Any online students? Okay, we'll give this chance to online students. Online students. Anyone in online? My dear online. 13. Physical view component is executed by dispatcher servlet. As part of that, it receives the scoped data, formats the result, okay, generates the formatted output. Yes, na boss? Okay. Okay. Can you tell me what is number 14? Physical view component sends formatted result to whom? Bro. Dispatcher servlet. Okay. Can you tell me what is number 8? Dispatcher servlet calls handler method, but how it knows? Dispatcher servlet submits the received controller class bean ID to IOC container, gets the controller class object. It is already got handler method signature. On that object, it calls the handler method. For this also, it internal uses what? Reflection API. What API? Okay. Fine. I hope it's good. Do one thing. After seeing, studying multiple times, after understanding multiple times, record your voice and listen yourself. If interviewer asks this question, how you are going to explain? Record your voice and listen yourself. If you feel satisfactory, no need of putting points on it. If you feel not satisfactory, you have to improvise the presentation. Or two friends record a voice and listen each other one and try to correct each other one. But while recording voice, don't cheat yourself by reading all the points that are there here. If you read all the points all there, it looks very great. But in the interview room, these points will not be there. You have to tell on your own. There will not be any interview with completion without asking this question. That much important it is. I think a few students who came here to share their success journey, they said, okay, I got job because what? MVC. I got job because of MVC flow explanation. So that much important it is, guys. Okay. So now let's get into session 3. Okay, whatever I have explained so far, that comes under diagram based flow. Now I want to give sample code for everything and I want to give code based flow. I want to, reveal how controller class looks, how handler method looks, what are the possible handler mapping, what are the possible, what is there? What are the possible handler classes? What are the possible view resolvers? How to develop the JSP? What is the right place to place the JSP? Everything we have to discuss. Okay, this is the flow diagram, guys. Already discussed one, right? So here, wherever single star is there, single star, single star, single star, they are ready-made. You need not to develop them. We need to just make sure that they are coming automatically or explicit configuration is done. Wherever 2 stars are there in blue color, wherever 2 stars are there in what? Blue color. What is there? They are ready-made ones. What they are, guys? They are user-defined. Programmer should spend time to develop them. The programmer must and should spend time to develop them. Everyone getting my point there, guys? Super. The process of keeping results in one or other scope is called what? Working with model attribute. Or nothing is there. We are keeping result in request scope now, guys. We keep request scope means request attribute. They are technically called model. Model means model data. Data attributes are not there. Three types of resisting servlet component with a servlet container. Already discussed. Declarative XML, annotation driven @ web servlet, and programmatic. But in Spring Boot MVC application, dispatcher servlet is registered with what? Dispatcher servlet is registered with what? Dispatcher servlet is registered with IOC. What is there? In a programmatic approach. What approach, guys? Declarative approach, annotation approach, programmatic approach. Servlet context dot add servlet. Are you getting my point? Star symbol in diagram indicates that they are automatically generated or configured classes of what? Spring Boot MVC web application. Symbol indicates that they are programmer developed user defined component. Even service DAO classes are what? User defined classes. Service DAO classes are what? User defined classes. Convinced, my dear? Come on, everyone. In the Spring Boot MVC application, the following operation takes place automatically. Dispatcher servlet registration enabled with what? Load on startup on it. Okay, we don't do this one, that will happen automatically. Dispatcher servlet registration with the slash URL pattern enabling load on startup. Are you doing it or it happening automatically? Dispatcher servlet created IOC container. We don't create IOC container. IOC container also created internally and what? Automatically. Handler mapping component configuration. What is there? Handler mapping component configuration. Request mapping, handler mapping class becomes what? Spring Bean. Simply through auto configuration activity or not there? Simply and literally through auto configuration activity are not there. So that means no need of taking handler mapping separately as a Spring Bean. It through auto configuration only it becomes Spring Bean. What is the class? Request mapping, handler mapping. Let me reveal. Actually, handler mapping and interface, guys. Implementing that interface, so many classes are there. But this particular class, request mapping, handler mapping, becomes a Spring Bean automatically through auto configuration. Next, what is there? View resolver configuration. Internal resource view resolver class becomes what? Spring Bean through auto configuration process. What process, guys? Auto configuration process. Everyone getting my point there or not? Dispatcher servlet created IOC container performs what? Pre-instantiation of singleton scopes. Pre-instantiation of singleton scope Spring Beans. Service classes, controller, view resolver, handler mapping, DAO classes, repository, and etc. So these are the various things that we are discussing or not, my dear? Super. One is what? Dispatcher servlet registration enabling load on startup. Dispatcher servlet created IOC container. Handler mapping component configuration. View resolver configuration. Dispatcher servlet created what? IOC. Okay. Container performing pre-instantiation of singleton scope. We don't do these things. They happen automatically. Are we going to do these things or they will happen automatically, guys? They will definitely happen automatically. Dispatcher servlet is ready-made servlet component given by Spring Boot MVC API, which will be configured or registered with a servlet container automatically, having what? Slash URL pattern by enabling what? Load on startup in programmatic approach of servlet registration. Super. Handler mapping component, view resolver component will become Spring Beans automatically through what? Auto configuration process. Done by what? IOC container, which is given by whom? Dispatcher servlet. Which is definitely given by whom, guys? Dispatcher servlet. Dispatch servlet is front controller servlet, one per project. Controller handler is what? One per module. Service is what? One per module. DAO class is what? One per DB table. And handler mapping view resolver also generally what? One per project. Because we don't use a different view resolver for a different. Handler mapping and handler mapping and view resolver will be taken on one per project. What guys? One per project basis. What basis guys? One per project basis. See. Spring-web-version.jar, Spring-web MVC jar file represent what? Spring MVC framework or Spring MVC framework. That is in Spring application. But when it comes to Spring Boot, guys, Spring-starter-web-version.jar file represents Spring Boot starter, okay, or Spring Boot MVC application. This is in Spring Boot MVC. So in this jar file, dispatcher servlet will be there automatically or not there. Okay. In some of the projects where we have added Spring Web jar file for standalone application to see web console, H2 in-memory databases. Okay, there I have added starter. That means these two jars might have come. Let me show. There's a dispatcher servlet as what? Ready-made servlet. We have a dispatcher servlet as what? Ready-made servlet. Let me open this. Tell me here, where is this? 6D19. Say launch. I think we have a project. In-memory DB is there. In that one, we have added Spring Web starters, guys. We definitely added what? Spring Web starters, right? Yes. Okay. When we add Spring Web starter, automatically we will get Spring hyphen data JPA, JDBC. Yeah. Spring hyphen web hyphen version.jar. Spring Boot hyphen web MVC version.jar. Web MVC.jar is there. Go to Spring hyphen web.this. Okay. I'm looking for HTTP dot here. Is there any class called dispatcher servlet? Not there. Okay. Forget about this. Not there. Okay. Spring hyphen web MVC. Okay. Yes. There is a web.servlet is there. Inside the dispatcher servlet is there. So are you going to develop dispatch servlet? No, it's a ready-made. It's there in some jar or not there? It is definitely there in some jar file or not there. Okay, now I'll try to open its source code, guys. Control plus Shift plus T. Search for what? Dispatcher servlet. Search for dispatcher servlet. Sir, extended framework servlet, right? Extended framework. But it should extend from HTTP servlet, na? Now you go to its source code. Framework servlet is extending from what? Servlet bean. Okay, don't worry. HTTP servlet bean. HTTP servlet bean is extended from HTTP servlet or not there? That means it is a ready-made servlet or not there, guys? Super. I would like to give this hierarchy somewhere. Spring dot starter dot web hyphen. What is there? Version dot jar file. Version dot jar file gives version dot jar file gives version starter gives multiple jar files including spring web version dot jar and spring come on, web MVC version dot. Got it now, was spring web MVC version dot. Convinced, my dear? Come on, everyone. Yeah. Spring web version dot jar and what? Spring web MVC version dot jar file. Okay. Okay. And representing. Okay. Spring or Spring Boot MVC module. Okay. The Spring web MVC version dot jar file contains, what is there? Contains org dot, where is this? Spring framework dot web dot servlet dot dispatcher servlet as predefined front controller servlet. Having the following hierarchy. Having the following hierarchy. Yeah. First, it is extending from HTTP servlet. It's an abstract class. HTTP servlet B. Next, framework servlet. What is next, guys? Framework servlet. Lastly, dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet. Yeah. Yeah. What's the relationship, guys? Extends. Here also, what's the relationship? Extends. What's the relationship? Extends. Yeah. Controller or handler class, guys. I think one thing is clear. We need not to worry about dispatch servlet. This is ready there. It's a registration with servlet container having URL pattern / enabling loading startup also happening internally or not there. Okay, now let us see more points about the controller or handler class. It's a Java class annotated with @controller. We generally take this class on one per module basis. This class can contain multiple handler method annotated with what? @request mapping having request path. The handler method can have flexible signature. That means method name, return type, param count is completely our choice or not there. We can decide everything based on the need, guys. Every handler method of handler class is identified with what? Request path that is given in request mapping annotation. We generate request to handler method by specifying their what? Request path in request URLs. By specifying their request path in what? Request URLs. Everyone getting my point there, guys? Super. In small web application, the handler class handler methods directly process the request having business logic. Whereas in what? Medium and large scale application, the handler methods contain what? Delegation logic to interact with what? Service DAO classes. To simply literally interact with what? Service DAO classes. Are you getting my point, my dear? A typical handler class looks like this. Sample handler class, guys. Controller, right? Class name. This makes this one. Sir, where is bean ID? Since you have not given bean ID, default bean ID. Class name will become bean ID. @request mapping / home. Public string home. Sir, why string is recommended? Generally we try to return logical view name. Logical view name is a simple string only, na boss. That's why. Show home. These parameters are not fixed, guys. Okay. There are a bunch of allowed parameter, bunch of allowed return type. You can happily choose one of parameters and return types from them. You can happily choose parameters and return types from them, no doubt in that. Everyone getting my point there, guys? Come on. Super, guys. @controller, request mapping / home. Public string show home request, logic for request processing, logic for request delegation. Everyone getting my point there or not there, guys? This is my request URL. Yeah, see guys, this is the handler method where we request process the request, typical. There are list of possible return types, guys, list of possible parameter type. Flexible means completely not flexible, guys. Okay. It is 20 return types are there, you have to choose one of them. 30 plus parameters are there, you can choose few of them as parameter. Purely based on your requirement, based on your need. Okay. One controller class can have any number of handler method. Every handler method is identified with its what? Request path. Given in what? Request mapping annotation. Each incoming request will be mapped with what? Handler method based on this request path. Based on this request path. Everyone getting my point? Yes. Allowed return types are nearly 20 plus return types are allowed for what? Handler method. But most of them are given by keeping what? Spring REST in mind. Spring MVC, we use very little number of return types are not there. In Spring MVC, we use very little number of return types are not there, guys. Spring REST is equal to Spring MVC ++. Spring Boot REST is equal to Spring Boot MVC ++. Come on. Officially, there is no module called Spring REST, Spring Boot REST. Spring MVC module only we will use in two angles, guys. Angle number one for developing web application. Angle number two for developing what? Distributed applications. Already we discussed all these points now, my dear. So these are the possible return types now, guys. But most of the return types are designed by keeping what? RESTful web service in mind. Okay, for a MVC application, we hardly use 1-2 return types. The best written type is string. Sometimes we use what? View, map, model. Okay, model and view. So these are quite regularly used, but mostly used is what? String. What about remaining things, sir? Remaining things we use, guys, but they are given by keeping what? A RESTful web service in mind. I'll highlight them in RESTful web service. What about possible parameter types, sir? Yes, there are multiple possible parameter types also. There are multiple possible parameter types also. The possible parameter types are 25 plus are there. How many are there? How many are there? 25 plus are there. Are you getting my point, my dear? Super. Tell me. Request response session. Request response session. Like this. Param, header. Many are there or not there? Okay. These are the best, but best of the best is what? Map. Okay. Model attribute, error generation. So nearly 30 plus are there. Not compulsory. You have to use one. Okay. According to requirement, you can choose combination of these parameters. You can happily choose the combination of these what parameter. If you don't take method with parameters also, no problem. Okay. Only based on that we can. That's why we can say what? Flexible signature is there or not there. What is there, guys? Flexible signature. Okay. Let me confirm that. Go to this @request mapping. @request mapping. API docs. I'm looking for documentation, guys. @controller docs. This is controller class now, guys. This is request mapping. Look at request mapping. Spring MVC possible return values. Possible return value. These are the possible return types are not there. Yeah. Possible method arguments. These are the possible method parameters are not there. Yes. So see, flexible means not 100% flexible, guys. 20 plus return types are there, 30 plus parameters are there. You have to play with them. Why, sir? Why, sir? They can make completely flexible, na? Sorry. Who calls the handler method? Dispatcher, sir. Suppose if I take XYZ parameter, arranging and calling, arranging that parameter related object, calling that method is my responsibility or dispatcher, sir. Suppose I have taken XYZ as what parameter type. Do you think a response servlet can arrange as that XYZ class object? Suppose I have taken some ABC as parameter type. Do you think response servlet can arrange that ABC class object? No. That's why it has given only those possible parameters which can be arranged by dispatcher servlet in different situations. Yes or no? Na? Then they can give freedom for return type, na, sir. Who receives the return value of the handler method? If dispatch servlet don't know how to receive and how to handle it, what's the use of getting that return value? That's why dispatchers, what can be received and handled by dispatcher servlet? What can be? Received and handled by what? Dispatcher servlet. What can be received and handled by what? Dispatcher servlet. Only, come on. Only that is taken as what? That are given as allowed return time. Are you getting my point there, guys? For which the dispatch servlet is comfortable to arrange while calling method, for which dispatch servlet is comfortable to receive after calling method, are given as what? List of possible parameter type, list of possible return type. List of possible parameter type, list of possible return type. Everyone getting my point, my dear? Super. Okay, here. Why there is no 100% flexibility to choose the signature of handler method. To choose the signature of handler. Answer. Okay, na? Handler method should be called by dispatchers. Dispatcher servlet by arranging the what is there necessary values or objects that are required to pass as arguments. So only those parameter types are allowed which can be passed by what, guys? Which can be passed by dispatchers. Which can be passed by dispatchers. Yeah. The return value of handler method. What method? The return value of handler method should be taken and used by should be taken and processed by what is there, guys? Dispatchers. Should be taken and processed by whom, guys? Dispatchers servlet. Definitely should be taken and processed by whom, guys? Dispatchers servlet. The return value of handler method should be taken and processed by what? Dispatcher servlet. So only those return values are allowed that can be taken by what is there? Dispatcher servlet. That can be taken by dispatcher servlet. Are you understanding my statement, guys? Super. In Spring Boot MVC web application, if you place controller classes under what? Root package, where Spring Boot application class is placed, then controller classes will be scanned automatically by whom? IOC container to make them as what? Spring Beans. To simply literally make them as what? Spring. Okay. I think you got the clarity why there is no 100% flexibility in signature. Because you are not calling, you are not receiving. Everything is done by dispatchers. So definitely, dispatcher servlet allows only those parameters, those return type for which it is comfortable to receive and process, for which it is comfortable to arrange and while calling the method, right? Okay, what's the next one? Handler mapping component. What is there? Handler mapping component. It is a helper component to whom, guys? Dispatcher servlet. It is definitely helper component to whom, guys? Dispatcher servlet. To decide right handler method of right handler class to process the request or to delegate the request to service and DAO classes. There are multiple ready-made handler mapping classes. All those classes are going to implement what? Handler mapping interface directly or what? Indirect. In different version, different classes are coming as Spring Beans through auto configuration. Generally, there is no need of developing custom handler mapping. If you want, you can develop by implementing what? Handler mapping interface, but generally not required. Especially in Spring Boot MVC application, according to the version we work, certain class is coming as what? Spring Bean through auto configuration process. And that means it will be activated automatically to do its job or not there. For completing its task or not there, guys. It is a component with whom dispatcher servlet handovers the request. This component uses what? Reflection API support internally to search for a handler method in all controller classes, finding what? Matched handler method and gives that what? Controller class bean ID, handler method signature back to whom? Dispatcher servlet to make dispatcher servlet calling that handler method on controller class object. On what? Controller class object. Are you understanding my statement, guys? Okay. On controller class object. Now tell me next one. All handler mapping classes are ready-made classes implementing what? Handler mapping interface. It's a component with whom dispatcher servlet. Okay. All handler mapping class, ready-made class. Spring MVC API gives lot of predefined handler mapping classes for different situation. Mostly there will not be need to develop any custom handler mapping classes. Tell me. Bean name URL handler mapping, controller class handler mapping, simple URL handler mapping. Useful in XML driven Spring MVC application. Nowadays, no one is using it. Default annotation handler mapping. Default in up to Spring Boot 4.x. Spring 4.x. Useful in annotation driven configuration, guys. Request mapping, handler mapping. What is there? Default in annotation driven configuration from 6.x and what? 5.x. Even 7.x also same story, guys. Even in 7.x also it is default. Yeah. Conclusion. In the latest version of Spring MVC, Spring Boot MVC application, directly, indirectly, we use what? Request mapping, handler mapping as what? as default handler mapping component. As a default handler mapping component. Got the point, my dear, or not there? In Spring Boot MVC application, the request mapping handler mapping class comes automatically through auto configuration, and it will be pre-instantiated automatically by dispatcher servlet created IOC container. Spring MVC application can be deployed. That's a different story. I think you got the clarity about handler mapping. Okay, tell me, according to latest version, what is the handler mapping component that is coming? Request mapping, handler mapping. It comes as a Spring Bean. Will be instantiated because it's a singleton. Okay. The moment dispatch servlet traps the request, it will hand over the request to this handler map. It will decide write handler method and handler class passes that information to dispatcher servlet. But are you going to do anything or it comes automatically? Dispatch servlet automatically. Handler mapping auto. Controller class we have to develop. But flexible signature, guys, come on. Return type and what parameter types are flexible. There are 20 to 30 list is there. From that list you have to pick up them. From the list you have to pick up them. Is that clear, my dear? Come on. Yes. Where is this 20 to 12?